Hey guys, I hope you're doing well. Hope this video is reaching you at a good time, whether you're about to go to sleep or you just woke up or it's in the middle of the day. I hope that you guys are doing well. I'm a little bit more energized and happy to be talking with you guys because this past Wednesday we met in person and it was awesome. About 20 Cove kids came and we had a ton of high school leaders. Miss Cat was with us, and it was just great just to see you guys, to play Nine Square with you, to catch up. Um, for those of you that don't know, we are meeting every Wednesday night at Christchurch Lake Forest from 7 to 8 o'clock. And it'll mainly just be a time for us just to hang out and be with each other and have fun. So looking forward to seeing you guys there. It was really just a big pick me up for my week, and I'm excited just to do more of that and to be to interact with you guys more in person. I've just really missed that. But for those of you that know, we just finished our teachings, our series in Jonah. We've kind of been choosing a new series every single month, and so for this month, there's 4 weeks in July. There's 4 Sundays in July. So we thought it'd be cool to go back a little bit in the story of Israel to the book of Judges. Um, Judges is one of my personal favorite books. That time period, like Joshua, Judges, and First Samuel, are like some of my favorite stories from the Bible. I really like reading it because it's like kind of like reading like a science fiction novel or like Lord of the Rings, because it's like, but this is actual history. It's an account of history, but at the same time, just the way it was written and what's going on, it's really cool to watch. And Judges kind of sets the tone for what the nation of Israel, the people of God, do for the rest of the Old Testament. So you have Genesis and Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, and that kind of shows the start of the people of God, the start of the nation of Israel. Through Genesis all the way to Deuteronomy, we see God serve and save and deliver his people, and really kind of prove to them that he is their provider, he is their Lord, he is their protector. Every blessing that they have, they are a blessed nation because of God. And so Deuteronomy ends and Joshua starts, and they finally enter to this promised land, the people of Israel. There's millions of them, or millions of the people of Israel, and they've been waiting for 40 years to finally enter this promised land that the Lord has promised to them. In Joshua, we see them finally dwell in this place, and like it's a very victorious, like coming of age book where like the people of Israel who have waited generations, some people didn't even get to see the promised land, a whole generation didn't, but we finally see God's promise be fulfilled in Joshua, and it's a very victorious, very like triumphant, awesome, happy ending type of story. And then we go into Judges, and Judges is a lot more dark. The people of Judges, it picks up with the generation after Joshua dies. So Joshua is the leader after Moses, and that's why the book is called Joshua. It's about him and the people of Israel during that time, and he leads the people of Israel to victory. And like by the end of Joshua's life, by the end of the book of Joshua, the people of Israel are in the land of Israel, which they have been hoping for, which the Bible has been leading up to this point. So Judges is the first time we see the people of it, the nation of Israel, dwelling in the promised land. And it doesn't go very well because the people of Israel forget who God is, and they forget who got them there in the first place. And we see them get into a whole mess of problems and trouble through the generation of the Judges. And so the book starts out by telling us that Joshua has died, and so that's saying that the human leader that people had been looking up to, first it was Moses, then it was Joshua, like he had passed away, and so now there was no like real leader, there was no king yet. It was just God, and that's how God had set it up. The people were supposed to look to God, and then this generation. The generation now that starts in Judges doesn't know who Joshua was. Like they've lived past him, so they don't really know the stories of Exodus. They've forgotten God, and so that's what we need to know about the beginning of Judges. And We're not going over a particular story in the book of Judges because we're going to do that the next 3 weeks. But I want to take this first week to kind of explain to you the structure of this book and what happens, because there's a very obvious cycle that happens in the book of Judges, multiple times for years, for hundreds of years. The people of Israel didn't have a king, and they found themselves doing the same exact thing over and over again. You know that term, history repeats itself? Well, that's found here in Judges. I don't know where history repeats itself, where that origin comes from, like where that phrase comes from, but it could be found in Judges, because the people of Israel do the same thing over and over and over again. And it starts with them forgetting who God is. So if you were to read the first, like chapter 2 of Judges, it kind of gives you like a structure, like a skeleton of what happens the entire book. If you read just chapter 2 of Judges, you would understand the book of Judges completely. Because after chapter 2, it goes on to explain each judge, each leader of Israel, and the state of Israel during that period. And so that's all that Judges is just going over different leaders, and they're referred to as judges. They're people that God brings up to protect the nation of Israel. So we start in Judges with Israel forgetting who God is. And what that means is they start turning to other gods. They start looking to other things to give them life, for promises to be fulfilled. They, instead of going to God for certain things, instead of doing their sacrifices like they're supposed to do from the law, they look other places. They go to idols. They worship a guy named Baal. They mingle with the people in Israel that aren't Israelites. The Canaanites. They mingle with them. And so they start to forget who God is. They forget how them as a people got to this promised land in the first place. They're like, I don't need God. I'm just going to do my own thing, and I'm going to serve the people I want to serve. And mainly I'm going to serve myself. So they fall into new types of sin and idolatry. They start to look to other people other than God. Then the next part that normally happens in the cycle of Judges is when they start to go through with sin, and they start to look to other idols and to serve other gods. They all of a sudden find themselves getting enslaved. They get captured by enemies like the Philistines or other Canaanites. They come in and invade Israel, and they take them captive. So Israel forgets God, and then they start looking to other gods, and they start serving other gods, making idols, doing idolatry. And then shortly after that, they get captured. They get enslaved by an enemy territory. Then they realize that they are in trouble, that their sin has gotten them into a hole that they can't get out themselves. And so they look up to God, who they had known about but didn't really experience for themselves. They look up to him, and they call out for him. And they call out for God to save them from the position that they're in, because they know that the sin had brought them to a spot that they can't get out of, and their only hope is for God to bring them out. So they call up to God, and so God responds, because it's the people of Israel, and he loves the people of Israel. So God responds, and he raises up a judge to lead them out of something. And it's not the judge that's particularly doing the leading. And we'll look at stories where we really realize that it's really not the judges doing anything at all. It's really God working through the judges. But God raises up a human to lead these people, the people of Israel, the new generation of Israel, out of captivity. Then, after the judge has done his job, Israel is back and free. They are totally out of the enslavement. They are no longer doing the sin that got them into trouble in the first place. They are just living good lives. They go back to serving the Lord, which is exactly where the book of Judges begins. And then they start the cycle all over again. And so they're back at the top of the cycle is serving the Lord, and the next tick is they fall into idolatry. They start committing new sins, which then leads them to getting captured. And then when they are captured and they're enslaved, they realize that there's nothing they can do to get out of this captivity. And so they look to God. That's the next tick. They turn to God. They cry to him. They realize that God is the only person that can get them out of this mess. And so then God responds, and the new tick is he raises up a judge for them. And then that judge serves the Lord, delivers his people, and then points them back to God. Israel is saved. That's the new tick. They are out of captivity because of the judge. And what that leads them to do is to back up to the very top. They turn to God. They serve him. They worship him. But then the next generation forgets all of that, what they had just been doing, and they start their own tick. And they fall into their own patterns of sin. And then they get enslaved. And then they call out to God. And then God raises up a judge. And then they serve God because they are released from captivity. And then the next generation comes. And it's just an endless cycle. Over and over and over again. And that's what we see in the book of Judges. I don't even know how many chapters are in Judges. I think it's like 12. Nope, I'm wrong. It is 21. There's 21 chapters in Judges, and almost every single chapter, there's multiple judges. There's multiple generations that forget what God has done for them and who fall into sin. And what we see throughout the book is that we as humans are unfaithful, but in the midst of that, God is faithful. So even in the midst of our unfaithfulness, our failure to commit to God, our failure to depend on God, God is someone who will always follow through. God is someone who will always pick you up and save you from the sin that you are in. A lot of the Old Testament talks about sin as being a snare, and a snare is like a trap. Like think of like a bear trap or a raccoon trap. Maybe I know some of you guys have raccoons and coyotes in your backyard. Imagine a raccoon gets trapped. He finds something enticing in a trap, like marshmallows or something. He nips at it, and he gets caught in a trap. And the only thing that can get him out is a key to let him out, to unleash him. Sin works very much so like that as well. We are just like raccoons looking for a treat. Sin looks enticing, and in a moment, it can be enticing. Like a marshmallow for a raccoon, it tastes good for the moment, but then all of a sudden he looks around and he sees that he's trapped. Just like that, sin does the same thing to us. It looks enticing, and once we indulge, once we follow through with it, we are trapped in it. And we cannot get out of it ourselves. That's what the book of Judges tells us. And thank goodness that we aren't the ones that need to get us out. Instead, we need to look to God, because God's the only one with the key. God is the only person who can release us from the snares, release us from the traps. And that's what God does over and 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 over again in the book of Judges. He consistently follows through and is faithful to his people despite them not being faithful to him. And so that's what the story of Judges, that's what the book of Judges is all about. And so I've kind of spoiled it for you guys, but the next few weeks, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to look at a different generation of Israel and see how they have failed God, see how they have turned away from God. And then we look at the trouble, the mess that they are in, the trap that they have set themselves in. And then we see them turn to God. God raises them up a judge. And each of these judges that we're going to go over Deborah, Gideon, and Samson. And maybe you guys have heard of some of them, but probably Samson. Samson's probably the most popular. But all three of these stories are very cool stories, and it shows how these people were faithful, but also unfaithful as well, even though they were judges. They were people, too. They were humans who were flawed. But we see God, who is not flawed, who is perfect, work through them and save the Israelites. And so I'm really excited to go over this with you guys because it's really fun. Like the story of Samson, the story of Gideon and Deborah, like very fun stories, but it's also very true and very real in our lives. And so that's what I want to really kind of hammer in today as we are kind of closing up. I want you guys to realize that the sin that God saves you from, the sin that God sent his son down to die for you from, like that sin is very real. Whatever it may be, whatever trouble or sin that you may be committing, I just want you to know that it's something that is very legitimate. And when the Bible tells you something is wrong, it's telling you that because it cares about you and it loves you. God is telling you these things because he knows what it does to you. He knows the traps that it sets in your lives. He knows it so well that he knows that we can't get out of it. And so that's why he intervenes. That's why he sent his son down to die for us. And in the Old Testament, before Jesus was around, during the time of Judges, he raised up judges for the people of Israel. God is consistently, throughout the Old Testament and throughout this book of Judges, he is consistently saving people from the sin that they are in. And that's the God who we serve. And what sin ultimately is at its core is us being unfaithful to God, us rebelling against God, us doing the exact opposite of what God does to us. See, God, when God saves us, he's showing that he is faithful to us. He's showing that he protects us. He's showing that he is everything that we need in life. And when we sin against God, we are telling God, we don't need you. We don't need to be protected. We can get out of the messes that we do on our own. We're not maybe blatantly saying that as we sin, but that's ultimately what we're doing. So it's an act of unfaithfulness on our part when we sin. And it's an act of faithfulness by God's part when he saves us. And so we'll be looking at the book of Judges this next month, and we'll look at how God is just this faithful God, even though we are unfaithful. And I'm excited to go through this cycle with you guys for the next 3 weeks. And hopefully it can kind of expose sin in your life, and you can see how it has snared you, how it has trapped you in your life. And hopefully, ultimately, I'm hoping that you guys will look to God and realize that the only way out of sin, the only way out of the rut in your lives is through God. So that's what we'll be covering the next few weeks, and I'm super excited to do that with you guys. So I'm going to close in prayer, and then, yeah. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this, just a great opportunity, another month to just study your word, Lord. And I thank you for just the incredible stories that we're going to learn about in the book of Judges, Lord. And I hope ultimately that it can point us back to you, that we can realize that we are ensnaring ourselves, that we are trapping ourselves when we rebel against you, when we sin, God. And I pray that we can know who to look up to after reading these stories. Or I pray that we can realize that you are a faithful God. You are someone who will protect us, Lord. And I thank you for that. And in your name I pray. Amen. Thank you guys so much. I hope to see you guys on Wednesday in person, and then on Friday for COVE Hangouts. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. See you later. Love you all. Bye-bye.